Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Shares with Kevin, where we add value to people's lives happening every day at 12 on ebizradio.com. For our lunchtime marketing segment, our resident genius, marketing and communications expert, Craig Pagely. Hello, Craig. How are you doing?
Hello, Kevin. I'm very well, thanks. Yeah, just can't believe how quickly these shows are just whizzing by. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I just felt like I spoke to you yesterday. And
I know, it's unreal.
Craig, so last week we had a really good, fantastic conversation, but don't you want to just sort of give us a bit of a lowdown on exactly what we spoke about around that customer experience conversation?
Yes, Kevin, thanks. So we extended the customer experience conversation into last week, looking at the Kantar CX Plus report, which did a really nice investigation around the retail category, grocery retail against fashion retail and general retail, and there were some really interesting insights that came out of that. And then just trying to understand the role that customer experience plays in the grocery retail space. So the little tidbits that I want to share from last week's conversation is, as I say, picking up from the CX Plus report, and it covered some really great insights, but starting off with a very important point that customers will spend up to 35% more with grocery retailer that is truly customer centric than with one that is not. So obviously from a grocery retailer point of view, there are some important factors that they need to consider. And the 3 points that I'm going to share from last week are the following. They need to prioritize e-commerce, digital, and omni-channel innovation. And omni-channel grocery services, as you know, are now a driver of customer preference, with many more grocery retailers including this in their omni-channel mix. Retailers do need to keep innovating and pushing the boundaries of CX to remain relevant by offering a differentiated omni-channel experience. That does, however, come with some cost, because these are not cheap platforms to evolve and innovate. Nevertheless, they need to better leverage employees to drive customer experience and emotional engagement. And this is a point that we really covered quite a bit in the last two conversations, because it is that emotional engagement that is the critical driver in enabling employees to either engage or disengage with prospective customers. So while there's often an emotional connection between the grocery employees and customers, this does not necessarily translate into the retailer being more customer centric. Retailers may need to better understand the cause and effect of how employees can impact more positively on customers in the moments that matter to drive customer centricity. And the last point there is to think holistically about delivering positive emotion. Again, a point that's come up time and time again is it's all about the emotional connection, and obviously you want a positive emotional connection. So grocery retailer experience has not changed for decades, and as such, retailers need to reimagine the grocery experience of the future to deliver that positive emotion and meet ever-changing ways that customers discover and shop. And as you know, it's a constant change and evolving minefield that in itself. Retailers will need to find new ways to connect emotionally and sensorially with customers, both in-store and online. And that again talks about the continuity of that seamless customer experience journey, Kevin.
Craig, it's so funny because today I was just chatting to an HR expert, and they were talking about onboarding, the onboarding process. And again, one of the theme conversations that came out of it was, again, the emotive connection that you have even with your own staff. So I mean, it's spectacular to kind of see that organizations, marketing, the whole conversation around how we do business is getting closer and closer to how do we make people feel good at the end of the day, and how do we hold that dear and important to the process. But I just love that connection.
I really like the point you make about onboarding. It'd be interesting to do an investigation to see which organizations are getting the onboarding right or wrong, because in many instances, even the biggest businesses I've worked in across the world, day one, they arrive and go, oh, damn, you're here. We forgot about that. Let's spend the day with HR and integrating with the people while IT sets up your laptop and get your security access. And, it's those kinds of things that would make a really great onboarding conversation.
Yeah, and to the point where she was saying, and not to take away from today, but to the point where onboarding should be about 100-day process. And she's coming from an expert opinion of 25 years experience, right? So you kind of go, well, that's a whole different conversation to be considering. But again, bringing it back to people and how that is the influence and the key point around the success of a business. But I mean, what are you going to share with us today, Craig?
Kevin, just quickly before I jump into that, I really like your reference to the 100-day onboarding process. When I was sent to the UK to work with Brand Union in London to do the turnaround on the Vodafone global brand account, Simon Bolton, then CEO of Brand Union, gave me a book in my new role as head of client service and engagement in the London office. And it was the 100-day onboarding period. What are you going to do in your first 100 days? So obviously there's a lot written about it. And yeah, when we do an onboarding conversation, I think I'll go and pull out some of those references and things as well. So important point there. Yeah. But yeah, today, Kevin, I think referencing point 2 of the tips that I just shared and taking into account the fact that retail employees are integral to building emotional engagement with customers and in delivering that above average customer experience, I'd like to expand on the importance of employee engagement in the retail sector specifically for today.
Fantastic, Craig. I'm looking forward to that. And so tell us more exactly about how to do that and how do we do it?
Great. So let's start by setting some context on the topic of employee engagement by referencing a really great informative article that I came across published on the 2nd of March 2021. So real current insights, written by Kirsten Reiber and published to the Quantum Workplace blog, titled "What is Employee Engagement? What, Why, and How to Improve It?" We learn 3 key things. Employees who feel connected to their organizations work harder, stay longer, and motivate others to do the same. And I think really that is what organizations want their people to be doing. Employee engagement affects just about every important aspect of an organization, including profitability, revenue, customer experience, employee turnover, and more. And finally, research states that 92% of business executives believe that engaged employees perform better, boosting the success of their teams and the outcomes of the organizations. And that I'm sure is something that every executive in business wants to hear about their respective teams and people.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of what I do, it's imperative. Some of the actual leadership programs that we have, quite specifically, are aimed at teams. And how do we get the teams on board with that? And how do we get the teams speaking the same language and focused in the same, direction? And Craig, you'll be surprised at the amount of business out there where people just don't know. They don't know what the values of the business is. They just kind of arrive there, they do their job, and they don't know. There's no kind of formulated, structured way of this team working together. Wow. And the impact that you actually get when you actually go through this, because some of the programs are only the shortest program we have about 10 weeks, and then further than that, all the way to about 3 months, where you're working around one kind of process with these people, and the impact and the outcome that it starts having to the success of what you're saying here is mind-boggling. It's like turnaround, and you kind of go return of investment that's increased in the business purely based on the fact that everyone is now get on board with how this is going to play out in that environment. So exactly to this point that you're making now about the 92% of engaged employees and how important that is, and the impact that it holds in an environment.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Really, really is. And you know, it's such a broad topic. So I want to just pick up on one or two other definitions on employment, employee engagement, Kevin. One article describes employee engagement as the extent to which employees feel passionate about their jobs, are committed to the organization, and put discretionary efforts into their work. And those words play directly into what you've just described. However, one of my favorite definitions in this instance comes from Wikipedia, which states the following. Employee engagement is a fundamental concept in the effort to understand and describe both qualitative and quantitatively the nature of the relationship between an organization and its employees. Where employees are engaged, they are more likely to invest in the work they do, which leads to high quality of work produced. By investing in employee engagement, your company will be able to increase productivity, work quality, and retain top talent. And I think that in itself is probably one of the most important concepts for consideration in this regard.
So quick question, Craig. So who is responsible for employee engagement?
Oh, great question. Yeah, it's a topic that solicits a lot of commentary and many mixed points of view. But suffice to say that some believe people and culture initiatives are the responsibility of leadership or HR, while others believe that people themselves make the organization. In this instance, they feel that responsibility lies with the actual individual employees to create the culture of the organization themselves. And that is quite a big stretch from one side of the spectrum to the other. So referencing the Quantum Workplace blog article again, it states that as the number one touch point for employees, managers are responsible for implementing the engagement initiatives determined by leadership and HR. Managers serve as the sounding board for employee opinions and concerns and are responsible for relaying these to HR and leadership.
And now just to interject there, one of the biggest segments that South African businesses struggle with is middle management and upskilling for middle management positions. So as much as there's a responsibility to management, the question is, do they know how to manage?
That is a great question. Yeah. And probably not.
A lot of the time, no, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll touch on managers in this next particular section because there's a really great article. So Robert Hicks, he's the Group HR Director at Reward Gateway, which is an employee engagement platform that combines employee recognition, surveys, communications, discounts, and analytics into a single solution to drive employee engagement. He states the following. We know that in broad terms, there are 4 parts of the business which need to be included in the thinking. Number 1, CEO, 2, leadership team, 3, managers, 4, employees. So these layers or levels are not mutually exclusive and they can be co-joined or overlap. However, they are concurrent and consecutive and should be aligned to work together for the outcomes that benefit each and every one of the individuals in the organization. So, whether it's the top-down or the bottom-up approach, CEO, leadership team, managers, employees, interchangeable but concurrent and consecutive.
Yeah.
So, in closing on that point, though, it is really the collective of all the 4 points, though, Kevin, that one needs to look at and see coming together and how they work together to actually drive the business forward and enable great employee engagement.
So, Craig, one of the disconnects that we also find, in this space is when you have a group of people who have a title, because they have a title, they don't necessarily believe that they need leadership cultivation or intervention at all, So, but the very opposite of that, when we look at a brand like Coca-Cola, so a colleague of mine works with Coca-Cola, Peninsula Beverages, and they've put their entire management team, from directors all the way down to floor managers on leadership programs. And they are one of the only brands that has stayed open through the COVID period. They never let go any of their staff. The impact and how they actually, went about making a stand even in COVID, just speaks to the leadership quality that the leaders have.
That's fantastic.
When you look at that statement, when you kind of go, CEOs, leadership team, managers, employees, if the CEO and leadership team haven't bought into leadership as a skill, leadership as something that you implement within your environment on a consistent basis, it really leads to a whole different kind of company. But Craig, you mentioned that the fact that CEOs, leadership teams, managers, and employees are collectively responsible. How do they achieve this?
Sure. Again, another great question, because this topic is just so fascinating and really presents some incredible thought starters out in the interweb. So this question is covered quite succinctly in the Robert Hicks blog, where he defines the specific role or function that each has in the mix as follows. So CEO, the leader of the business, the figurehead, the person with the single biggest impact on any program, especially the employee engagement one. We need them to lead and support what is being delivered, but we also need their honest voice to make sure it aligns to their vision for the business. So an active participant in driving this particular program. At a leadership level, collectively, they run the business day to day. They pull the levers. They have the sphere of control that decides whether the program works or fails in their areas. To make this work, you need to ensure that the program matches their needs, but also aligns to their objectives. You need their input and the nuances of what is needed in their respective areas. You need their thoughts and feedback on what you're trying to do in a program of this nature. Then we move to managers. Perhaps the most obvious part of the process. You need them to align what you want to do, what you need them to be brought into, and what you're doing, and need them to run initiatives with their local teams, to get feedback, to help share and shape what you're doing, and you need them to be the soldiers in the army of success in what you're trying to achieve. So the managers here, as you can see, have got a phenomenal and highly dependent role in it. So you need them to align to what you want to do. You need them to be brought in to what you're doing. You need them to run initiatives in their local teams, to get feedback, to help share and shape what you're doing, and you need them to be soldiers in the army of success in what you're trying to achieve. So there's 6 components right there in the management layer, Kevin.
Yeah.
And then last but no means least, the employees. If you really want engagement to work and work well, you need to engage your employees. You need to get their feedback on what you are doing, get their help with programs, get them to do what you are doing, feedback on this, and in many cases, be the champions of it all. And there's a great point here is that, feedback, get the participation and buy-in and support of employees. And so many of these organizations do it from a top-down approach, but they don't understand, they just pass the message and initiative instruct down the line, as opposed to building up from the bottom and really getting buy-in and weaving the fabric of the culture of the organization across all layers. So in other words, without CEO sponsorship and support, the chances of the program will not embed deep enough into the company. Without leadership team ensuring global alignment and local support across the teams, you'll end up with uneven delivery and success. Without managers buy-in, you will not have partners to work with you on making everyone aware of the program and having to deliver it at a local level. And lastly, without employees being engaged with the program, you'll not engage them with the business, most importantly.
What's strange, Craig, is, the section of leadership, you would think, it's in the name, when you're leading, people look at you and kind of go, okay, that's how you do it. This is how you're supposed to do it. And invariably, what people instinctively, organizations do is from management level downwards, they kind of go, oh, these people here, they all need training. They all need an intervention. And you're kind of going, yeah, but if you're the leadership team and your managers don't know how to behave, they don't know how to get the buy-in, they don't know how to articulate exactly what it is the CEO and leadership team are saying, then you need to start from that perspective, right?
Yeah, ineffectual leadership. Yep.
Completely, yeah. So it's funny that, even in the way that you're putting it together today, invariably it never starts with the employers or the manager. It really starts with the CEO and his leadership team. But so now that we know the various levels of the organization and how they work together, explain to us, what are the top drivers of employee engagement? If I'm reading this.
Kevin. A great article by Kristen Reiber, this time titled, "What is Employee Engagement? What, Why, and How to Improve It?" We learned that employee engagement drivers are items that have large impact on employee engagement outcomes. These drivers are the items that the organization should take action on when deploying or developing such employee engagement programs. And there's multiple. In one article, there were 40 drivers of employee engagement. In another one, there are only 3. But this particular article has 10 very clear and relevant drivers, and I'll just list these for you. My job allows me to utilize my strengths. I trust our senior leaders to lead the company to future success. I believe this organization will be successful in the future. I find my job interesting and challenging. The senior leaders of this organization value people as their most important resource. My opinion seems to count at work. If I contribute to the organization's success, I know I will be recognized. I see professional growth and career development opportunities for myself there. The senior leaders of this organization demonstrate integrity. And lastly, I have the information I need to do my job well.
Yeah.
Really, really good, clear, succinct, actionable engagement layers, and employee right at the center of the organization, and just being empowered and enabled to deliver their commitment to that particular organization. Vitally important. But to close on that point, Kevin, and looking at that article again, there are 3 key themes that Kristen references and describes as to what the core connection and engagement is in the workplace. So the first one is motivating work. The second one is inspiring teams and leaders. And the third one is commitment to the organization. So let me expand a bit on those from her report. At a motivating work level, employees want their jobs to be challenging. They want to own tasks that use their strengths and have access to opportunities to develop their roles and career. It's important for organizational leaders and HR teams to match talent to roles that supply these aspects of an engaging job. And that's just such a vitally important point here. So it's not creating a job for the strength of the person, or it's finding a role in the business that matches the strength of the person and enabling that particular individual to just come to life and deliver for at their best. At an inspiring team and leaders level, leadership and team relationships are extremely important for engagement. Employees want to work for leaders and teams that put people first, value employee contribution, and show integrity. At a commitment to organizational theme, employees want to work for organizations that have a strategy built for success. They want to believe that they can contribute to that success in their role. Individuals want to successfully contribute to winning teams and organizations. And again, what's important here, Kevin, when you look at those levels that we spoke about, starting with CEOs, leadership team, managers, and employees, if the vision of the business and the strategy isn't cascaded throughout the entire organization, and every layer has a sense of belief that they've contributed to it and they buy into it and they signed off on it, you're not going to get that throughput in the organization at all. And when you do that, the commitment to the organization is in place. Absolutely.
Craig, I mean, to this point, I'm just relating it back to everything you're talking about and everything how I relate it to what I do. And that's why I get to do what I do, because you're looking at motivating work, inspiring teams, commitment to organization. The biggest disconnect is that how we use language and how we articulate information is skewed half the time. So when I say, we need to be successful, whatever success means to me, means completely something different to you. And that's the differentiator, because unless you're actually describing the actual behavior, describing how it behaves, what the thought processes are, breaking it down to that entire almost like a brain language map for them to understand it. It gets lost in translation,
Oh,
and people kind of
that's a great point.
Know what
Yeah.
they assume what they need to do.
It makes me think of how much time organizations are actually spending in describing, in articulating, getting the collective buy-in and shared common purpose. And as opposed to it's a poster on the wall with a set of values, set of actions, set of a great vision and mission and all the rest of it. But you're absolutely right. If there isn't effort put into the definition, the articulation of the meaning, across cultural groupings, across language, across geographic locations, there is an absolute misalignment through a single word that's misunderstood. And a really good point, that.
Yeah. So, I mean, Craig, listening to all of that, how do we tie this into real world and like traditional retail?
Yeah, again, Kevin, another point that's covered in depth in the article, why we need retail employee engagement now more than ever. This written by Matt Stolp, published on the bonify.com site, which is a workplace culture platform for building human connections in a modern, more remote workforce. And I must say, they got some really interesting blog content there, and just understanding the importance of culture in the workplace. So Matt Stolp's article opens by stating the following. When you examine issues of employee engagement in the retail industry, two things must stay top of mind. The first is that retail has experienced an incredible degree of economic and political turbulence in the past decade, and those factors have undeniable impact on the employee experience. Second is that retail employees are not faceless workers. As according to the New York Times, 1 in every 10 Americans work in the retail industry, Kevin.
Wow.
Yeah. And as we know, more and more businesses have had to adapt due to the constraints brought on by COVID pandemic, and obviously now offer e-commerce as a key channel in their customer experience journey. This disintermediation has, however, severely impacted the retail traditional channel, with many stores closing down for good and many staff losing their jobs in the sector. So, hopefully we see a recovery soon, Kevin, as many countries are beginning to roll out their vaccines and returning to some level of economic growth, because I'm sure after the devastating impact of COVID, that 1 in 10 went down to maybe 1 in 15, who knows, even maybe 1 in 20. But even so, I think we'll see a big surge back into more of retail workers taking on jobs again. Two other interesting statements that Max Stolp makes in this regard, Kevin, is the first is that while leaders in retail can craft strategies that meticulously address market factors, it'll be for nothing if employees do not feel engaged. When it comes to matter of the customer experience, research lends credence time and again to an oft-used but less true expression. The employee experience defines the customer experience. And I really like that particular paragraph. The second point he makes is that employees that operate retail stores are the face of the business. Absolutely. They have the closest interaction with customers. Absolutely. And they shape customer perceptions of the organization. On a day-to-day basis, they will help execute the customer-facing components of the business strategy. But if employees' emotional commitment to the organization and their daily work is weak, then the execution will be weak as well. And again, another really powerful statement here, because as I mentioned earlier, if you get the buy-in throughout all levels of the organization, at a retail a floor level employee, they will absolutely understand their role in contributing to the business strategy. And organizations that don't work through all four layers and thread the united fabric of that organization, retail brand, are just not going to survive. Absolutely.
Craig, I'm waiting for the day where organizations decide that on a Friday, the entire organization is learning something. Like when we get to that perspective, like that point in time, that's when you'll really see organizations from the CEO right down to the dudes standing, serving the clients at the front door. You'll actually see a golden thread of it running through well, because that's the requirement for a business to really get on the same page. Brands get it right, and they do still do it efficiently, but I think there has to be a significant like reframe and shift in why it's, if you really want to have impact in your environment with your customers, the man from the top to the bottom needs to be on the same page. And if we're not speaking the same language, it's not going to be. So I'm waiting for that to sort of start happening, because slowly but surely people are starting to realize training, intervention, and leadership, the actual skill of leadership, is something that's a consistent practice that needs to happen. It doesn't happen once and you kind of go, oh, well, now we know what we're doing. That's not the case.
I like that, Kevin, and maybe there's an innovative way that can happen. If one looks at France, from what I understand, is going to be experimenting on 4-day work weeks. There are 1 or 2 other countries that are interested in the concept in Europe. Well, maybe it's a 4-day, it's a 5-day paid week, but it's 4 days of work and 1 day of actual learnership, education, and personal growth. And I
imagine
think
that. Can you imagine that brand that sort of adopts?
Yes, absolutely.
Because as a strategy.
The other reason I like that is that 5 days of engagement is stronger for the brand than 4 days of engagement. And I think that if the 5th day is not about pushing money through the till, but about enabling you to succeed in your career, get a new position, be successful, go up the income line, all of those factors and variables that come on the back of great leadership programs, gosh, just imagine that organization.
I mean, the one point you make is motivating staff. You kind of go, well, what does motivating staff mean? When I feel like I matter, when I feel like there's something to go to, and I want to go there, then it's cool. But half the time, the experiences currently that we're sitting in, people are surviving. They're not thriving. They're surviving because they just want to make sure that we've got food on the table tonight. There's no opportunity to kind of go, oh no, when I go to work, they look after my education. They look after the fact that I feel good today. They look after the fact that I'm actually learning a whole new skill. So by the time I get back there on Monday, I'm going to kick some ass. That's not happening. It's not happening as much as it could.
Yeah. But then, taking the 2 points we've just covered into account, the reality is that we can't overestimate the importance of the link between retail employee engagement and customer satisfaction in retail. And what's really great about the article, it notes that through various studies, the 2 points are related, and to quote, each showing significant trends in a direction either positive or negative. But they cannot say for certain that a change in one factor causes a change in the other, because a perceived change may be a result from an influence of an unobserved factor. So when the causal link between retail employees' engagement and customer satisfaction is reported, it's saying that after isolating for any external factors, it is found that high employee engagement levels directly cause higher levels of customer satisfaction. Clearly, then if leaders in retail raise employee engagement levels, then they gain the competitive advantage in the marketplace. It's as simple as that.
So how do retailers actually improve retail employee engagement?
Yeah, Kevin, not as straightforward as we'd like to think or believe.
No.
And as noted a few minutes ago, there are a lot of moving parts in that impact on employee engagement in the retail world. Matt Stropel's article again really covers some really good points, and he's got 4 key themes that answer this question. In fact, you've actually just touched on one of them, and I was waiting to get to this to share it with you. So retail turnover, theme 1, retail turnover is breaking records. Take note, bad ones. So retention is commonly accepted, is a commonly accepted signifier of employee engagement. But in retail, a high turnover rate is expected, and to some degree, it's even considered healthy. While no one necessarily wants to lose employees, attrition helps cycle unmotivated, unproductive workers out of the retail stores. And voluntary turnover from more driven employees often results with them landing at a location that's a right fit. So an interesting point there is, allowing the employees to find the right place for themselves in the organization, as I mentioned earlier, but also using natural attrition just to eliminate the bad apples from the bunch.
Yeah.
Theme 2, turnover is turning skilled employees away, and this is the problem area that you cited here. A study that examined data from LinkedIn user profiles looked at staff turnover on a global scale, Kevin, and found that the retail sector, take note, had the second highest turnover rate of all industries. At 13%, they are 3% higher than the global average for staff turnover in organizations. Yeah. It's important to note a slight caveat here. As much of LinkedIn's core functionality still revolves around corporate positions and networking with many staff and administrative store clerk or cashier positions, is slightly skewing it because they're not necessarily users of the platform. But the scary factor here is that actually the turnover rates could actually be a lot higher than if you do get to measure once those particular levels of an organization having engaged in LinkedIn. Another key point to note, though, is that the LinkedIn study found that many retail workers are actually searching for new careers, Kevin, and only 35% of job changes are opting to stay in the retail sector. And that in itself is quite alarming. Again, the lack of professional development and opportunities for career advancement across the retail sector is a definite area of concern and absolutely a key driver in staff opting out of the industry.
And maybe it's a case of saying, well, as the employer, you don't have to do much. You're just standing there dealing with the customer and typing in whatever you're typing in. Like, there's not much to it, so it's quite easy. But I think that frame, from a leadership perspective, if that sort of was taken, if that was framed differently, that this is the voice, this is the face, this is the outcome of where this business could potentially go, that would change, that high rate that we're talking about as well.
I think there are a couple of other factors to take into account here as well. And, I just think of some of the great retail success stories in South Africa at a pure leadership level of really understanding retail, when you've got retailers like Whitey Basson, who have understood retail better than anyone in this country, and they've understood what leadership is, and they've understood how to drive leadership and delivery across the entire organization. I think that's where success is. Whereas bringing in a venture capital fund to pick up the threads of failing retail, they're not necessarily bringing any leadership into the organization. They're bringing management by numbers, which actually totally disintermediates to what leadership should be. And it really is to ensure that retail leadership needs to be matched with retail organizations. And the money number crunchers on the back end, need to do what they need to do. But when retail is in distress and you get VC funds coming in to turn it around and buy the books and offset the deficits in that regard, I still think that they fall short by not putting effective retailers in place to drive the retail organization. It's the numbers that are driving the organization, and they're trying to force the leadership teams to work within the constraints of the numbers, which in many instances is just not a feasible proposition.
Yeah, it's almost like a failed business model.
Yeah, and I'm putting my neck out by stating that, because I really think that there is a point where finance drives business away from where leadership would be driving business. And yes, in those instances where business rescues in place, finance needs to be a driver of the principles of where the business needs to go. But leadership still needs to be given the chance to be leaders in fixing a business. And maybe we just don't even have enough leaders in business to fix businesses. And there could be a really great band of opportunity by creating some really good degree courses around leadership for fixing broken businesses.
Yeah, absolutely.
But Kevin, the third theme there now goes to our wonderful layer of managers again. Managers are responsible for retail employee engagement. So according to Gallup, a US-based global analytics and advisory consultancy, and I must admit I was quite impressed with some of the content that they produce. They state that you can attribute a 70% variance in employee engagement to a manager. Now, that's a substantial percentage of direct responsibility assigned to a manager. And when you've got organizations that have got that weak leadership team and management layer, and 70% of the performance of employee engagement and therefore employee output is assigned to that individual, one weak manager can cripple an entire division and therefore impact severely on an organization, Kevin. So yeah, in other words, managers' influence over retail employee engagement is so significant that they can make the difference between highly or poorly engaged workforce. And the report makes a very powerful statement in that non-desk employees and frontline retail workers are often considered too hard to reach, take notes, too hard to reach compared to their sedentary counterparts. Many, for example, do not have corporate email addresses, and this miss out on important organizational communications that they rely on, communications that relay organizational goals, the type of messaging that helps contextualize daily work and imbue it with meaning. And again, we spoke about it earlier. If that conversation flow doesn't permeate throughout the organization, if the lower level workers don't feel that they're contributing to the development and delivery of the business strategy and success of the business, they're not going to be able to grow out of that particular role when communications don't get to them because they don't have an email address. But again, there are some successful retailers again in this country that are using app-based technology, pre-opening, post-closing, in-store training and things like that, just to ensure that the message delivery does cascade and permeate across all levels of the organization. The biggest risk here, Kevin, though, is that communications across retail organizations are often passed on to managers to relay comms to non-disc employees face-to-face. And the face-to-face piece is quite important here. Yes, we're living in a COVID world, and face-to-face is now through screen to screen. But so many of the employees at the coal face of customer engagement on the floor, retail floor, they just don't have any face-to-face time with the managers of the organization. And that's something that really has to change. So since non-desk retail employees are typically underserved by these communications, it's not surprising to learn that only 41% report knowing what the organization stands for or how it differs from the competitor. And when there's no differentiation, it's very easy to get the attrition from one organization to the next in this retail space. On closing on that theme, the research notes that when managers take time to directly communicate across all levels of the retail organization, it helps employees navigate tense interactions with customers with ease. And the final theme here, Kevin, is employee rewards don't feel rewarding anymore. There's been an exceptional increase in showrooming, whereby consumers research and select products in store, even try them on for right sizing, but they purchase these via e-commerce platforms. And unfortunately, what happens here is this disintermediates the retail staff at the purchase phase, with a net result that no sale can be attributed to a particular retail employee in a retail store. And as we know, Kevin, many of the retail staff are also on incentive programs for the sales that they influence in store, as there's time, energy, and emotional connection required in supporting consumers in making those decisions in store. However, it goes unrewarded when the same consumer leaves the store empty-handed and makes the purchase online. And I often talk about this, it would be great to see even the store get some kind of recognition in an online environment, but I'll expand on that later. The report notes that two things can happen on this front to make employee rewards feel more rewarding, Kevin. The first is that formal incentive programs need to be reconfigured in a manner that accounts for the effects of showrooming. Benchmarks and criteria for what constitutes formal recognition will obviously fluctuate depending on the store demand and where the store location is geographically. The second is that the formal praise can be supplemented with micro recognition through informal social praises that celebrate wins big and small. All retail employee engagement programs can benefit from robust micro recognition practices. And again, that comes through the likes of social media platforms, apps on devices in store and the likes. And this will cultivate intrinsic motivation in employees and can help motivate them to be, take note, 3 times more engaged than employees that are motivated by money. But from my point of view, Kevin, what I'd like to see is some sort of extended reward and recognition program being implemented, where a retail assistant could be provided with a unique code, and he or she can pass that code on to a customer that comes into store that is obviously showrooming, and that code could be used and entered in the e-com platform when a purchase is made online. And that at least allows the retail assistant to be recognized and rewarded for their efforts in influencing the sale.
Yeah. Thank you, Craig. So, important takeaway tips you can leave with the listeners today. I've got so much to add to this, but I know that we're running out of time. So,
okay, Kevin, I'll get through it quickly. Then we may well have some time for one or two extra anecdotes at the end. Then I think that the points referenced in an article written by Debbie Shotwell, who's the Chief People Officer at Saba Software, published on the retailcustomerexperience.com blog, states that there are 4 tips to keep retail employees engaged and motivated. And the article provides insights in ways to deliver an exceptional employee experience that will help drive performance and deliver higher ROI. So we note from the article, to succeed, especially when also contending with shrinking margin, increasing competition for customer loyalty, and ever-changing consumer preferences, retail organizations need to attract, develop, and retain competent, enthusiastic, and accountable employees. It's therefore important to have an effective talent development strategy to keep employees engaged and motivated to deliver a great customer experience. And she describes 4 ways to keep those employees engaged. The first being, let associates in on the bigger picture. So employees up and down the line of the organization want meaning and purpose. They want dignity in their work. It's important not only for office workers at headquarters, but also hugely important for retailer workers to think about with store associates, including seasonal workers. No matter the position, retail workers want to know what they do at work connects to the larger organization. As I mentioned, participating in the strategy, driving upwards. Linking individual goals to higher level organizational objectives gives employees a context for the work and helps to drive employee engagement. Point 2, facilitate social and collaborative learning. Nearly 3/4 of both HR leaders and employees believe that social tools help employees on teams collaborate from different locations is more important, or much more important, than it was even 2 or 3 years ago. So the role of technology is really a big driver of employee engagement. The informal collaborative learning that happens every day amongst colleagues is just as valuable as any formal learning program. Retailers can facilitate this type of learning by creating social learning communities where employees can collaborate and ask questions, as well as by enabling instant feedback and recognition from peers and managers. And this, as I mentioned, can happen pre-opening or post-closing, or it can happen on that dedicated Friday learning day that you talk about, Kevin. The third point is shift to ongoing performance management. And for me, probably the most important point of the 4, Kevin. Many performance management programs fall short of expectation for both the organization and the employees. And the reason for this is that performance management has seemingly become a periodic ritual to take notes, be endured rather than an ongoing conversation that uses feedback and coaching to align and engage and inspire. Real-time feedback and continuous coaching helps employees perform to their full potential, improving engagement, retention, and productivity. By moving to an ongoing approach to performance management, where coaching for growth is prioritized over managing performance, an important point, retailers can better meet the modern workforce's growing demand for real-time feedback. And with the help of performance management technology, organizations can put continuous coaching and feedback at the heart of their talent management process, helping managers and employees have an impactful discussion that actually improves performance without it becoming a burdensome task. And the final point in this theme is embrace a culture of continuous learning, Kevin. By cultivating a culture of continuous learning, organizations can move beyond simply checking the box when it comes to training, delivering learning experiences that engage employees and translate into a better customer service. Retailers can help develop an organizational mindset that prioritizes ongoing employee development by incorporating aspects of learning and development into the company mission statement and goal setting process, as well as empowering staff to drive their own development by embracing and facilitating informal self-driven learning. And Kevin, by implementing strategies, processes, and technologies that open up communications, facilitate real-time feedback, encourage continuous learning, and foster a true team atmosphere, you can engage employees and help them feel like they're part of something meaningful. And that's a wrap of the points to note from today's conversation.
You know, you just everything you've just spoken to today is exactly why I do what I do, right? I get to be that guy who really looks at companies and business and kind of goes, well, I'm standing here from the outside and I'm looking in and I'm kind of going, this is what you're saying and this is what you're achieving, but there's a whole bunch of disconnect happening here. And, you know, just through the coaching, you know, I look at the coaching element too, when you're doing a training intervention or a leadership intervention, that coaching moment that you have with an employee, how that lends it to reframing and the success and someone that's there to just listen to me. It's one of the biggest things that corporates need today is, I think the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, has actually done a study around that quite a high, I think 78% of employees just needed someone to listen to them.
Wow. That's unreal.
So when you kind of consider why coaching and an intervention like this, why this leads to customer engagement and employee engagement and the success to a business, it really makes sense, because you're kind of going, inevitably, you're still dealing with humans. And if you're not tapping into why those people are important to this business, you may as well not have a business. It's an uphill road the whole time. Yeah. And that's the beauty about what I get to experience and do, is because I look at that and I start like understanding and sharing and giving information, and eventually people start connecting the dots and they start finding each other, and then everyone starts behaving together in aim of this one specific voice and the one goal, and you kind of go, well, that's the point, right? It's just beautiful.
It is, yeah, to break it down like that and allow it to cascade through an organization and just see the multiple layers of positivity and benefit that you bring to individuals in their personal life as well. That's really rewarding and encouraging.
Yeah. Craig, so to finish off today's chat, thank you for today. I found that very insightful, as always. What are we lined up for next week? I know this is
Kevin, right? In for an exciting session next week. So we've got a guest speaker, Heidi Brouwer, who's the Chief Marketing Officer at Hollard Insurance here in South Africa. Heidi's been quite a catalyst in a really exciting campaign that they've been running recently called Big Ads Campaign. It's about sharing Hollard's big ad space with smaller businesses to help create better futures for those organizations. And it's about playing it forward. And Heidi's going to share some of her successes and give us the insights into the foundation of this campaign, and share how the small businesses that are participating are going to benefit and move forward in their success.
Fantastic. Thank you. Guys, if you want to know more about it, go and check it out on ebizradio.com. It happens every Thursday where Craig and Craig shares all this amazing information and I just question him to death. And hopefully he has a good answer for me. But it's every Thursday, 12 o'clock. And Craig, thank you. I'll see you next week.
Kevin, thank you. Looking forward to it. Yeah, it's going to be a great show.
Absolutely. Cheers for now.
Bye.